Hello and welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage. I'm here to give you a front row seat to the industry's most exciting awards races. Who is in the running? What makes awards-worthy film and television? How can you, listener, win a statue of your own? We're sitting down with actors to get that insider's perspective on these questions and more, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
When I was a younger actor, I always thought, if I achieve this, if I get that award, that I will be happy. And I'm here to say that it will not give you lasting happiness. Welcome to the world. Nothing here will give you lasting happiness. You gotta find that another way.
That was James Franco, Jamie.
It was.
James Franco was just here.
He was in this very seat that I'm sat in right now.
It's true.
There's still some residual warmth to it.
Yeah, what a trip. I really didn't know what to expect, which I don't think anyone who's going to interview him really knows what to expect.
No, he's something of an enigma, really, isn't he? But he was,
yes.
he was, in a way, what I expected, you know, from someone.
Which was what?
Intense. Committed, yeah. And there was a real depth to
very smart,
him as a person. Yeah, very smart, very quick-witted.
Yeah. This is a man who, in addition to being an actor in an unusually large variety of projects, is also a writer, novelist, poet, director of film, TV, everything, commercials, and a painter and a teacher, and just
makes me sick.
I know. Well, he's kind of done everything, and that was actually became sort of the main thesis of our interview, was like how to balance, as an artist, breadth versus depth.
Yeah. And you were telling me that just in the 1 year, he had films coming out as diverse as Milk and Pineapple Express.
Milk and Pineapple, I believe they did come out, the same year. And
which is hilarious.
It is hilarious. They're so different. But I do remember that being a thing of like, wow, this is he was remarkable in both, in two completely different movies. And I do think before that time, most people knew him, maybe from Freaks and Geeks, which is where he met Judd Apatow and Seth Rogen and all of his kind of longtime collaborators. Yeah. But also from like the Spider-Man movies. And someone who frankly looks like James Franco, people are going to cast him and expect him to be the leading man.
Yeah.
To be like the movie star and to do the kind of boring, I don't want to say boring, but the kind of leading roles.
Yeah, the expected. Yeah,
and he has proven time and again that the only thing you can expect from him is the unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he, clearly he will have known that. So that direction would have been kind of an easy choice. But when you're in that position, bucking expectations becomes your thing, and then you can redirect every.
And The Disaster Artist, I think, is the culmination of that. It's like that. It's like the James Franco hypothesis to the nth degree. It's like, this is how to subvert expectation of being unexpected, of like how to pull the rug under everyone in a way. Yeah, The Disaster Artist is totally extraordinary. And as we talked about in the interview, it is the backstagiest movie of the year. It is
very
about
meta.
Working actors. It is the La La Land of this year, in fact. And it's really fun. He's also starring in 2 roles, and as a producer and as a director, on HBO's The Deuce, which is a totally extraordinary series set in the 70s. And of course, it's just strange that for James Franco is a light plate to have those both going on right now.
Your intro into this interview is going to be extremely long. You're going to have to string 2 songs together.
How do I? Yeah, you're going to have to play the longest. I don't know how to do this. I literally have this long list of, it's Freaks and Geeks, Spider-Man, Pineapple Express, Milk, Pilot's License for a Role I have written down. This is the end, the interview, Yale Literature PhD, Of Mice and Men on Broadway, which we sort of touched on too.
Yeah.
That's just the beginning. So I don't know how.
So just do the rest for the intro.
I'll just do what he's doing now, maybe. Yeah, maybe that. He's just done everything.
Everyone knows who James Franco is.
Exactly.
And,
it was really fun having him in the studio.
Yeah, it was. Well, I think we should probably get to it.
Let's get to it. I'm going to take a whack at this intro.
This episode is sponsored by A24, presenting The Disaster Artist. In theatres everywhere, December 8th.
James Franco is an actor, writer, director, producer, painter, teacher, and all-around artist, known for playing a variety of roles and taking on a variety of projects, everything from his early days on Judd Apatow's Freaks and Geeks, to his Oscar-nominated role in 127 Hours, to his Golden Globe-winning performance as James Dean. Last year he starred in Hulu's 11/22/63, and this year on HBO's The Deuce. He currently stars in The Disaster Artist, a film he directed about Tommy Wiseau and the creation of the notoriously bad film The Room. For more, just look at his IMDb page. He's been in everything. Here it is, our interview with James Franco. You're based mostly in LA? Is that right?
I'm half and half because we do the Deuce here.
Oh, yeah.
It's about half the year.
Yeah, cool. And the Deuce, are you filming a season 2 soon, or?
We'll start in March.
March, okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
Thank you.
The detail on that show is just insane.
So good, and I'm so lucky. I get everything I have. I mean, everything I could want. I have incredible showrunners,
right?
The best writing on television.
The writing.
I get to direct. I get to play 2 parts that are very different.
Is that the dream, to play not 1 but 2 parts in like a prestige project?
I guess if you're an egomaniac, no. I mean, no, and it's not just that. I mean, it's more like when I play, like a leading role, right? Mm-hmm. Like, generally speaking, they have to carry the emotional sort of arc of the thing.
Yes.
And so oftentimes I can remember being like in the lead role thinking, oh man, look at that supporting role. Look at, you get to do this crazy character or something. Or even like in The Fighter, I remember Christian Bale's speech at one of the awards things was like, thank you to Mark Wahlberg, I get to do the showy role and, and Wahlberg is more of the quote unquote leading role. And then when you're sort of the supporting part, sometimes you think, well, I get to I come in and I give, 1 or 2 funny lines, right, and then I'm off, and the leads get to, do all the dramatic stuff. Right. And here I get to do both. You know what I mean? And so. Yeah,
cool. Because sometimes a supporting character doesn't have a full arc.
Right.
Is it your job as playing a role like that? Do you have to find one? You don't want to make it all
Yes,
about
I mean,
you.
it's always the job. And what I was saying before, like Frankie, the more kind of crazier, outgoing of the twins, he doesn't really consider things, like Vincent does. But with Frankie, I always, regardless of the role, regardless of hero or villain, supporting or lead, I always look for some sort of emotional grounding for the character. That I find something that the character wants, or someone that he is attracted to, or something to really make him real. And in life, we're very complicated. There are many facets to our personalities and our inner lives. I've found that in movies or TV shows that usually if you can just find one solid thing, that will guide the character. Certainly for a movie that's, 2 hours, but even on the show, it's like maybe for the season, each character has one main thing. And certainly for the whole series, there's probably just an overarching thing, like what is driving this character, and that applies whether it's drama or comedy. I mean, I think it's one of the things that made something like Pineapple Express like
I was gonna say
more than just a stoner comedy. Is that
totally.
It's a bromance, you know.
Yeah.
It's Saul, my character,
Totally.
like is lonely. He needs a friend. He needs that, and that otherwise it's just and that's actually really something I think that Judd Apatow at least for our age really reestablished, that and the idea of the bromance, you know, that that it's based in relationships, and otherwise the characters are just sort of floating, and they're just sort of machines to deliver jokes.
Right. Well, and it feels like Pineapple Express and several Judd Apatow movies that you've worked on, you guys are following that rule of like play comedy as seriously as you can, or rather being in that character in Pineapple Express, you completely believe, as that character, you completely believe everything that he wants.
Yeah.
You're not being like yuck.
Yeah, yuck. It's a pretty character-y character, but but just like my character in The Disaster Artist, but it's underneath that unusual surface level, there are real human emotion. I make sure there's real human emotions that people can relate to.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the secret to a good deep comedy is it's allegedly about one thing. It's allegedly about like these goofy laughs and like Tommy Wiseau, what a goofball.
Yeah.
But what that movie is actually about is like the pursuit of something bigger, the pursuit of like the American dream, or like Hollywood, of like
Jason Mantzoukas, who has a little part in the movie, was describing it the other night after the premiere, that it's like the American dream with this guy who
from another
insists that he's an American, but he's like, no, obviously not. But then that's almost kind of amazing, you know, like, you know, one of the amazing things in the book is, you know, like Tommy Wiseau is wrapped in mystery. He, you know, enigma wrapped in a mystery and whatever. That, and you can go and, you know, people go online and have opinions about or theories about how old he is or where he's from and all that. And you probably can easily guess that, you know, he's not really from New Orleans, but and not all-American guy. He sounds like this, but
and where his money comes from and all that.
And the money and how old he is, you know, he's probably in his late 40s when he made The Room, and he said he's in his 20s, and, you know, he still is like reluctant to fly, I hear, because he doesn't want to have to show his real ID. I don't know. But, you know, what becomes more interesting to me than just figuring out the quote unquote truth is the character, you know, his character that he's created, this version of himself that he has really manufactured, and to me that's fascinating, and the reasons underneath, and what you were saying a second ago about the American dream, or this one of the Jarecki brothers, the directors, you know, the Jinx, and you know, and they do other documentaries, and anyway, one of them was saying to me after watching the movie, he's like, oh, this, you know, it's so interesting because on one level it shows like how we, you know, it really examines how we all try to fill the void with, you know, success, or, you know, and I certainly can relate to that, whether I was conscious of it or not, that, you know, early on when I got into acting, I worked really, really hard at it. And I think in the back of my mind, I thought, you know, if I achieve this, if I work with this person, if I get that award, you know, that I'll be happy. And then, you know, 20 years later, I've achieved a lot of the things that I thought I wanted. And yeah, you know, I'm very grateful, but I realized that ultimately, it didn't fill the hole, because I was still like working just as hard, and it was like, where am I racing to, you know? And realized, oh, I'm like running. I'm just running.
You specifically are, yes.
Yeah.
You run.
Me? Oh, me? I do?
Yeah, you're very busy.
Oh, I see.
It's putting it mildly to say
I've
you're
stopped.
very busy.
I mean, I've stopped.
You've slowed.
I don't think, I mean, this year I only acted for 2 weeks, this whole year, on a Coen Brothers project.
Oh, cool.
Western. But
this calendar year.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I only worked 2 weeks.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But this is in addition to the poetry and the painting and the teaching.
No, I haven't done any of that this year.
Oh, really?
Oh, no teaching.
Good for you.
No poetry.
So I was reading all these profiles of you like a couple years ago, just being like, well, he doesn't really sleep. Like, nobody really knows how he does it. And like,
no, I'm getting more sleep these days.
That's
Although
good.
Last night, my brother took me and the writers out to dinner at Uncle Boone's.
So, okay, good.
So I'm a little tired. But no, and so, but on the other hand, Tommy, I think it talks about in the book, like, they were really smart, Tom Bissell and Greg Sestero, in writing these early sections of Tommy's life that they kind of keep it vague, and they're like, imagine a boy. They don't say like, it's a nonfiction book, but in those sections they kind of still wrap it in mystery, and they're like, imagine this boy in an Eastern Bloc country seeing American movies for the first time and longing to escape his environment and to go to America. And then I think what happened is he started to equate that escape to America with making it in the movies, that they kind of became synonymous. And if you also in the book is a really interesting section, and we kind of touch on it a little bit. Tommy does hit a low point, but in the book, Greg goes into more detail about Tommy leaving these messages at a certain point before the room, where Tommy was maybe even suicidal and at least very depressed. And he was not in LA at that time. And then the next time Greg saw him, he showed up with this full script of the room. And in the room, anybody that knows the room, at the end, the character kills himself. Tommy casts himself as Johnny, the all-American guy who's just a great guy and has a girlfriend and good life and friends all around, And then he's betrayed by his girlfriend and his best friend. They're both people that are closest to him, and then he commits suicide at the end of the movie. And when I think about that and think about how Tommy was actually very depressed before making the film, and that, in fact, he channeled that depression into the movie, to me, that's incredibly moving, and that the room in that light becomes this very personal document of Tommy's feelings about life and how he's maybe been betrayed. We even talk about it in our movie about how the characters in our movie are questioning, like, what does this thing mean? What are we making? Who did, he gets betrayed by his girlfriend in that, did somebody betray him in real life? And one of the characters, June Raphael's character, says, well, I think that's the universe. That, and so in that way, the room can be read as Tommy's very earnest expression of how he feels that nobody has helped him, that he's been let down again and again and again.
Yeah.
And
that does explain why he really wanted to do it all himself and fund it all himself. But it also
because that was the only way. Like, I wrote a review in Vice 4 years ago when I first read the book, and I said, look, I respect Tommy because how many thousands or millions of people have dreamed about going into the movie industry.
Totally.
And it's a really hard industry, and and Tommy did it. He made his movie, Absolutely. And that's amazing. He willed that into being.
Yeah.
But I believe movies work best as a collaborative medium, and there he was on the set finally of his own movie, and he didn't know how to shut off. All he knew was, I can only depend on myself and maybe my friend Greg.
Yeah.
Because everybody else in my life has told me, no, you're never make it. He didn't know how to shut that off and listen to other people with more experience once he finally got his movie in motion.
Right.
And so he created this, he made a lot of mistakes that maybe could have been avoided. On the other hand, what the normal kind of trajectory for that story is that he made something, it wasn't what he intended. What he intended, is clear from what he wrote on the original poster, a Tennessee Williams level drama, right? So that's what he intended. He didn't make that. Normally, what happens then is, okay, I realize that maybe I made some mistakes. Next time I go at it, I'll try to correct those mistakes. But then instead, the room became this weird, ironic success because people had fun laughing at it. And Tommy jumped on that train and kind of weirdly took credit for making it a comedy.
Right.
And so he never learned. And he never, but he also, I think it might be very hard for him to ever repeat The Room because when he made it, he put his heart and soul into it. And now he has taken on the persona of the Tommy that he thinks everyone wants him to be, the wacky, kind of funny Tommy. And so if he makes anything from that position, it won't have the same heart that The Room has.
Right.
Which I think is its secret ingredient. Like, there are plenty of bad movies that people will never watch again.
Right.
People have been watching The Room for 14 and a half years. And I think a lot of that is due to people's, whether they're conscious of it or not, people sense how hard he's trying.
Yeah.
How much of himself he's putting in there.
Yeah, you can see that completely. I mean, the funny thing is, like, we're Backstage, and Disaster Artist is by far the most backstagiest movie of the year in terms of like last year, La La Land was the same thing. Of like,
well, I used to, we were filming when La La Land was coming out, and I remember saying it was like the upside down of La La Land.
Totally.
Two people with a dream in Hollywood.
With the Hollywood dream. It's the exact same thing.
And ours is even more kind of hopeful and romantic than La La Land because our guys stay together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the Backstage readers and Backstage users and those who are going to those cattle calls and trying to get those agents.
Yes.
These movies resonate.
Well, yes, exactly. So this is for you, Backstage readers. This movie is for you because, when we were shooting, or even when I first read it, one of the things that really appealed to me is that, yes, it's an incredibly bizarre story, and that appealed to me. A very, very unique character.
Right.
But underneath, it is every actor's journey.
Totally.
Every person that wants to break into the film business starts on the outside, and has to kind of break into this hard business. And
some discover you got to make your own work in order to get anything done.
True.
Can't sit by the phone. True.
That's actually people, when I do Q&As, with younger people, often though you say, well, what do you recommend, to get in?
I was going to ask the same thing.
And I say, in this day and age, like when technology is so much more available and user friendly, and that there are so many more channels of distribution. I mean, if you just think about the old days, like you had to, shoot on film, and like I remember Scorsese saying like, well, I just we went to film school just to get our hands on the camera on the film, like and like nowadays you can film stuff on your phone, and like one of the best movies of the year is the Florida Project, and and his movie before that was Tangerine, shot on an iPhone, like that you can do that. So I always say, look, you can follow the traditional path if you want of, auditioning or, getting an agent and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, just make your own stuff and keep making it and putting it out there because, and when I taught, it was the same, my classes were really designed in this way where we were making things and then putting them out into the world. Yeah. Because that's how you learn the most is having other eyes on it. Or even like Tarantino's acceptance speech when he won the second Oscar for the script of Django. He said, thank you to all the people that listened to the script or read the script. He's like, didn't necessarily give me feedback or notes, but just listened. And to me, I was like, oh, that sounds like Steinbeck too, because Steinbeck, he used to read his stuff aloud and he wouldn't want feedback, but just having an audience automatically makes you see your work in a different way. Okay. And that's sort of where Tommy's trajectory went, both was a ironic success and an ironic tragedy, that he is a success. People are getting something from his movie. And he even told me like the other day, like I call it the Tommy Truthful Day because it was 2 days ago in LA. We were doing some press together and he was just so frank with me. Unlike any time before. And and he was like, you know what? I have to admit, like the room isn't exactly how I intend it to be, but I get reaction from people. So that's something. That's all you can that's all you can hope for in the end. And so to me, sort of like he put his thing out there. Yeah. He kept it, and he was the distributor. He paid for it. He paid for it to be in theaters for 2 weeks to qualify for the Oscars. Yes. It didn't get nominated for anything. It did not. But then, because it caught on this whole other way, he then followed that path. And so now he makes things and tries to be funny, but it's not like The Room.
There's no Hollywood story like it. Yeah. First of all, no one is going to spend, what was it, upwards of $6 million, $8 million on this movie. $6 million, over $6 which
million.
Which then did turn a profit, apparently.
Well, if you think about
it's a miracle.
The fact that I think he's his own main distributor.
Yeah.
And he told me just a couple days ago on Honest Tommy Day that it's in 100 cities right now.
Right now.
Now, maybe that's being helped because the Disaster Artist is coming out, but still, it's remained in theaters for 14 and a half years, once a month, and he's raking in most of that profit.
Right, because it's all him.
He has probably made a profit. Although, on the other hand, Greg has told me, Greg Sestero, who knows Tommy better than anyone, like, I don't know, he's like, I don't know, Tommy, like, reinvests his money in very weird things, like his underwear and all those, things, and I don't know how many underwear kind of things that he unloads on people. So
approaching this character, it sounds like there are two kind of levels to it. Where like obviously there's the lighter comedic, the bizarre qualities of him that like hook you in, and you're like, well, of course I would love to play that. Well, yes. But then there's this other layer of like he's a tragic figure.
That's
He's
what I look.
His own mystery.
Exactly. That's what I look for as a director. And I always look for, like, I've made a lot of indie movies, and I'm very proud of them. But like Cormac McCarthy, movie adaptation of Child of God about a necrophiliac running around the woods. I knew going in it wasn't going to have that much box office potential, but
right.
But I still always looked for something unusual. I had a very unusual story there, but how to at least try to bring audiences in. And that's what I've done with all my projects. I do want people to watch it. I'm not making it, to just play in a closet. Right. So like,
you want to make something artistic, but also commercial.
Yeah, and that's sort of the mandate for, I have a new company with my brother. It's like we are always looking for things that push the envelope a little bit or are unusual in some way, whether it's the subject matter or who we're working with or, how it's being done. But on the other hand, we want to, make things that are interesting and entertaining to audiences.
Right.
It's sort of the Danny Boyle model in a way. Like if you look at something like 127 Hours, he knew he wanted to make a movie about a guy stuck in a single place. Even before he got the Aaron Ralston story, he was interested in this project about a guy chained to a radiator, and the whole movie would have been that. So he had in his mind that he wanted to do sort of a guy trapped kind of story. But Danny is an entertainer. And so then the challenge was, how do I take that story and make it dynamic and entertaining?
Right.
And
cool.
And that's sort of what we do. And so here I had exactly that. I could see it. I felt the hairs on my neck go up because it was like, all right, this is a Hollywood story, but it's unlike any other Hollywood story. So that's a plus. But there's a way to do it so that it's, will move people. That they will be able to relate. Yeah. He won't, he's strange, but underneath, he's like everybody. You know, and I said at the end of my review in Vice, Tommy Wiseau, c'est moi, because I can relate.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And you did that. You did the Hollywood thing. Your trajectory is a little different. No one's got the same
McDonald's.
trajectory as him. Yeah, did you?
Yeah.
What other survival jobs did you have?
That was it.
Just McDonald's. Before Freaks and Geeks?
Oh, yeah. I didn't do Freaks and Geeks and go to McDonald's. That would have been the Andy Kaufman move. But no, I going to work at Jerry's Deli after he was on Taxi. But I was at UCLA, and then I dropped out, and my parents said, you have to get a job because we won't support you if you don't go to university. And I couldn't get any waiter jobs because I was like this 18-year-old that just like hardly bathed, and I just, and all the other actors had the good waiter jobs, and somebody said, well, are you too good to work at McDonald's? I said, no, I really want to be an actor, so I'll go and work at McDonald's. And then, and it's a good lesson, Absolutely. That's one of the other things I tell people. Look, when you're trying to do, you're trying to follow a creative dream, there's some weird mystical, kind of magic that happens when you take responsibility for yourself. Suddenly, it becomes much more real, and that's when it became very real for me. Oh, I'm working at McDonald's at the drive-thru from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Oh.
That made me work that much harder at acting. It's like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm not sort of half-assing. It's like, I left UCLA and I'm at the drive-thru. I better prove it, that I really want this.
How interesting. If you'd gotten a day job,
and it changes something in you too. There's something different about, the energy that you're putting out if you're just sort of like trying to cheat, or you're cheating on your credit cards, or going to debt or whatever. Like there's something about you, I think, that just radiates a certain kind of non-seriousness. And that when you are taking responsibility for yourself, I'm not saying automatically you're going to make it. I mean, I worked at McDonald's 2 or 3 months, and I got a Pizza Hut commercial, and then I could support myself as an actor from that point on. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to happen to everybody, but it does change you, and it does make you take what you're doing much more seriously.
Totally. And you did you have like a backup plan? Did you have a plan B, or was it always had to be acting?
I had a lot of interest. I got into, when I was in high school, I got into art after I stopped getting in trouble. Like I got in a lot of trouble, and a lot of that was really more running. Like that was fear, again, a fear of failure, and fear of putting myself out there and not making it, and I think, and again, ultimately that's one of the things I think that draws people to the room is we like to watch somebody put them, it's almost like a horror show that where we see Tommy throwing himself so hard into it and just failing so spectacularly. It's almost like I think didn't somebody say it was like some philosopher was talking about like breaking down comedy and like the idea of somebody else slipping on a banana peel was funny to us because it's not us.
Yeah, totally.
You know, we're not falling. That's almost The Room, you know, in a way. It's like, oh, that's not us. We're not putting ourselves out there and failing like that. Yeah, I feel better about myself. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that appeals about The Room, you know, sadly and not so sadly. I mean, and I think that's also brave of Tommy, you know. I think it's amazing. And I really respect him, you know, putting himself out there that way.
That's the thing. Like, I think about that, like, I can speak from personal experience of just like the fear of failure is very, very real. And you can't see the consequences sometimes of putting yourself out there for the sake of putting yourself out there and like getting people to listen to your work and to read your work.
Yeah.
And it's almost easier to just be like, well, I'm just creating this for me, or I'm not going to share it, and that creates that kind of more insular, just less risky thing that's not going to create something like
yes.
The Room is not maybe the best example, but like something like that.
And so in high school, I was getting in all kinds of trouble, and I would just fantasize about movies, fantasize about being, you know, a great writer, fantasize about being a great artist. But I wasn't actually applying myself to it. I was just running and fantasizing and imagining that I'd be like plucked out of like my juvenile delinquency into some, you know, position of great, you know,
of course,
artistry.
What was the pivot? What was the turning point? Was it McDonald's?
I got in enough trouble. No, I'm talking about in high school.
Okay.
I got in enough trouble that it was like, all right, wake up, dude.
It's a rock bottom. Yeah.
Get out of there. Yeah. And that's when I started getting into all the artistic things I was interested in. But when I left UCLA, I was a literature major at UCLA and just threw myself into acting. And it was sort of for like 10 years, it was like all or nothing with acting. Yeah.
As it should be for actors, for working actors, right?
Well... You know, we were talking about how I do a lot of things, or I did up until recently, and part of that was learned behavior from those early days as an actor. Working at McDonald's, it was like I better bust my ass, and then I got results. I got that commercial, and then I got some other things, and then not long after that, you know, maybe a year or two, I was on Freaks and Geeks, And so that sort of, I thought, well, there we go. You work hard at something, give it your all, work at it 24/7.
Yeah.
You don't sleep, you live and breathe acting, and then it'll pay off.
Yeah.
So I just use that equation for everything. Like, now that I eventually went through film school at NYU, and it was like, I got out of there and it was like, just direct as much as possible. Direct everything. Direct commercials, direct movies, direct, television shows, direct everything. Direct funny videos online, everything. And I think it did help. I did get a lot of experience. Not all those projects, led to great, successes or was, all received well. Some were.
Yeah, they can't. They can't all be total hits. Yeah.
But I logged a lot of experience, and now, I really don't think I would have been able to direct 2 episodes of The Deuce or direct this movie, The Disaster Artist, if I didn't have that experience behind me. Now, that being said, it was a combination of that experience and seeking out very good, smart, experienced producers that would I would either feel obligated to give them my whole attention, like David Simon. Like if he's gonna let me direct, I better step up and just be completely focused on that, not do 5 things at once. Or with Seth Rogen, sometimes he and his producing partner James Weaver had to actually just straight up say it was
pay attention,
just short of grabbing me by the ear and pulling me and just saying, pay attention.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, James, no, you cannot act in so-and-so movie during prep. Like, you need to be here.
Yeah.
You're the director. Be here and do the prep. And it was a lesson I had to learn because I was used to doing so many things at once that I could sort of delegate, but it was like after a while, you kind of have to say, look, or I just came to the understanding it's like, okay, look, there's only going to be so many things. You only have so much time left in this life. Mm-hmm. You better just, that means there's a limited number of projects that you're going to do.
Right. You got to accept that.
Why don't you just now find the things that you really care about that are worth giving your full attention and time to? And that's really what I learned on these two projects, The Deuce and Disaster
Yeah, you had to go through that period of just insane pumping out projects in order to reach this chapter, shall we say.
Yeah. So I think there is, with anything, there is a period of just doing as much as possible just to kind of get the, basics down to, figure out, like at every MFA program, no matter what it is, and I've been to a lot of them, they're teaching you how to find your voice. And that just comes from writing 1,000 poems of, reading 1,000 poems of, or watching, thousands of movies and being on sets and doing all that until you get to the point where you're like, okay, I know this. I'm familiar with this. I'm comfortable with this. Just like I got with the acting too.
Sure.
But then at a certain point, at least for me, realizing, okay, now I'm going to get more out of this if I'm still diligent.
Sure.
But I give more attention to fewer things.
Yeah, it's depth as well as breadth.
Exactly. More depth rather than breadth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have like this list here of just like all of the many projects. It's like one endless thing. And I want to ask.
Those are all backlog things that I did a while ago.
Oh, I know. And it's great that you've turned this corner and are learning this lesson for yourself, because I go through things on a personal side note where I almost guilt trip myself into not being that ultra prolific, like I'm haunted by some like potential version of myself that's like way more productive and takes risks and is more like whole.
Yeah.
More like, and so I don't know how you've gone the opposite direction where you're now at a point where you're totally at peace with not, packing your day full of work.
I did have to kind of hit a wall. I mean, somebody just sent me a quote. I'm probably mangling it, but it was by Edgar Allan Poe, and he was like, read a lot, write a lot, publish little. And I'm okay with that now.
Yeah. Whereas maybe your approach before was read a lot, write a lot, and publish a ton.
Yeah, and part of it too was trying to, that I did learn from feedback. You need to learn, because I also like at an early stage, I published a book, Palo Alto, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. Before that, I had been writing for years and years and years, but I wouldn't show anybody anything.
Okay.
And when I went back and looked at a lot of that stuff, it was not that great. Partly just because it was, I was younger, but also because I didn't let anybody read it. Okay. And it's like, as soon as I started going to, MFA programs, like, and having my classmates read my stuff and give me feedback, it didn't even really matter, like Tarantino's speech. It didn't really matter all the time what they said. Just the fact that I knew people were going to read it made me much more responsible about what I was doing and made me much more aware of communicating,
Yeah.
That this was, I was writing this to communicate to an audience.
Totally.
And so putting things out there, I think, was part of that.
Okay, but the difference with acting, because that's a major difference between acting and writing. Acting, you're pretty much always putting yourself out there, barring reciting Shakespeare in front of a mirror for yourself. Like acting, correct me if I'm wrong, is always, it's you, it's your own person, it's your own instrument.
And you're saying with writing, you can just write it and put it away and then maybe publish it later?
Yeah, like the acting itself seems like it has to be, you have to take that step of taking that risk of communicating with an audience out into the world.
I mean, yeah, we could argue. You could go and, I was just talking to Jonah Hill today, and he was like, I love, because he had done these series of recordings of prank calls, but he was like, he's like, and he was so right. He's like, you know what? For me, it's an amazing way to get into character. Like, even if I didn't record them, like, just play my character and call up a Best Buy.
Wow.
And talk to that person in my character, because they can't see me. They can't see that it's Jonah. And I'm just playing my character. What was this character say here?
Wow.
How would he be? And he's like, it's a great exercise in getting into character. So there's a form of acting where, you're
practice.
not really, you don't really have an audience or that kind of thing. But I know what you're saying, that
the risk
generally
seems
speaking,
high.
like the unless you're like Andy Kaufman again too, where it's just like nobody's in on the joke but you and Mr. X or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
that's true.
But generally, like, as an actor, you need others, you know, and and you probably want an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In order to get better.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this idea of feedback. Do you read criticisms of your projects? How much do you pay attention to that stuff?
My relationship with criticism has it's developed over the years. It was hard to read it when I was only an actor, because I was young and sensitive, and
sure.
I think it really is. I still believe it's hard to criticize acting in film and television, because anybody that works in those mediums knows it is so collaborative.
Yep.
And somebody has, directed you. Somebody has written the line. Somebody has edited the thing. Generally speaking,
Totally.
edited your performance.
Totally.
And so it's like, it's almost like you can find, often a really great performance or a really bad version of that performance. It's just the way it's edited, and
Totally.
and so after a while, when I was a younger actor, I just felt like, I can't read this stuff. It's not helping me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then when I started getting into other things, and it was like, I was directing or writing, I started reading criticism again. And it was helpful, but then I sort of got into my head again, and I was like, wow, I'm doing all these things, and I felt like, whether I was right or wrong, I just felt like they're prejudiced against, like, when I'm going to these other fields, they're looking at this stuff as the actor, writing a novel, as the actor directing something, as the actor doing this.
That's what you're most well known for.
And so then again, I stopped. But I've learned how to do it now. I've learned from David Simon, who comes from journalism and is really true to what he does and who he is, and that's the space that I'm in now too, and to be able to now look at and maybe I feel, I don't know, maybe I feel more understood now, or people, maybe it's, I've been doing a lot, directing long enough now that people kind of accept me as a director, or maybe it's just that I, have had these great producers, and I'm not just like out on my own doing my, following my own whims, that I have great guidance, but I'm able to read the criticism more now and get and listen to it, and get and use it as real feedback, and again, as we've been talking about this whole time, learn how my work is being received and learn how I'm communicating, because that's what I'm trying to do is communicate. So I do want to know how it's landing on people.
Yeah, that's part of the storytelling process. There's got to be an audience.
Yeah,
absolutely. We have to wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask one question. In a lot of your work, these short films and these indie films you've directed and playing Sean Penn's boyfriend's character in Milk, you are fascinated by queer artists, queer men. And I've always wondered why that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons and different reasons behind each of those projects that involve, these different characters that are, or subjects that are, queer based, or, these gay characters, like the poet Hart Crane or the poet Allen Ginsberg, or, this project we did, Interior Leather Bar, or being in Milk. Sometimes the first thing that drew me to it was not really their, queerness or orientation or anything. It was really just their art, in the case of Hart Crane or Allen Ginsberg. Right. But their identities and their queer identities were inextricably bound up in that art. And so that became an important aspect of their characters and personalities. Something like Interior Leather Bar started as sort of like just interest in recreation, but then, pressing on it more, learned that, all the history behind the making of cruising, and that it had been protested vehemently by the LGBT community at the time. That was an interesting history, but then that Friedkin had shot in the actual leather bars I think it came out in 1980, so he was shooting there in the late 70s. And then that even though there was a huge contingent of the LGBT community outside those bars when they were filming protesting, that Friedkin said the people that frequented the leather bars were their own little faction that were kind of outsiders at the time within that community. And so the actual patrons of those bars were willing to be in the movie. Right. And so he just told them, or according to him, he said, just do what you guys do on any given night. And then considering that HIV hit, not long after that. Right. Those scenes in the leather bars suddenly became these incredible documents of this lost time and place, or something that disappeared 5 years after. And so,
or was tainted in like a different way almost.
Well, those bars closed, right, in the wake of the HIV crisis. And so I became very interested in all of that, and then also and then I became interested in, like, I had taken this class at NYU in the critical studies department, even though I was in the production core track. And I with this Professor Chris Strayer, I took 2 classes with Professor Strayer, queer cinema, and 1 quarter or semester, and film and the body. Oh, okay. And we studied mostly how sex was portrayed in film, and I got really interested in the idea of using sex as a storytelling device that up until really recently, and it was always just used to kind of say one thing, these characters are attracted to each other, or just for gratuitous purposes, or that kind of thing. And that it could, because we were, so prurient.
Yes, totally.
Still in our ratings,
those rating systems, yeah.
Yeah, in our rating systems that, so much violence is allowed and
totally.
sex just isn't.
Says a lot about America.
I was very interested in exploring how to use sex as a storytelling device. And so then I met up with this guy, Travis Matthews, who was doing that very thing in his movies, his narrative movies, but using sex and real sex as a storytelling device. So that just expanded that. But anyway, and I just also, and I think I even, because I'm in that, it's sort of a weird half narrative, half documentary experiment, that Interior Leather Bar, and I'm in it, and I kind of talk about it in there, like, I am so bored of these
typical heteronormative
stories and heroes so maybe that's another reason I'm just drawn to these stories that haven't had a chance to be told in the same way that 100 years of heteronormative stories have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a pretty central part of your mission as an artist, is don't make something that's conventional or follows the rules, or just,
there you go.
Yeah.
That's probably,
part of
I like it.
philosophy.
Yeah. Like I said, my new company, Ramona Films, is if we have one underlying, MO, it's to make unusual things or push the boundaries a little bit, but still make our films for audiences. Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any last words of wisdom for listeners of this podcast, for Backstage?
Backstage. I think we've covered my big things. I always say, like, work hard. You don't have to, you can follow traditional paths, but you can also do your own thing so that you're not 100% beholden to the gatekeepers, and find your own voice. But the new, older, hopefully slightly wiser James will also say, find some balance. Because when I was a younger actor and younger filmmaker, I always thought, if I achieve this, if I get that award, that I will be happy. And I'm here to say that it will not give you lasting happiness. Welcome to the world. Nothing here will give you lasting happiness. You got to find that another way. Totally. You just wrapped this up in a big, beautiful bow. That was perfect. There you go. Thank you so much, James. This is awesome. Thank you.
This episode is sponsored by A24, presenting The Disaster Artist, in theatres everywhere December 8th.
Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe for more interviews from the front lines of the industry's awards races. In the Envelope is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City. Thanks, as always, to producer, editor, and all-around podcast whiz, Jamie Muffett. You can follow him on Twitter at JamieMusicNYC. You can follow me, Jack Smart, on Twitter at JackSmartWrites. Thank you, of course, to the team at Backstage, the most trusted name in casting. That's Peter Rappaport, Mark Stinson, Francis Ramos, Rawan Al-Khatib, and especially the astounding Casey Howe. For more awards and industry coverage, head over to Backstage.com. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time for another glimpse in the Envelope.